Now, these shoes only cost £8. But Kathy could not afford them. Her husband, Howard Walmsley, then said to her, I think you should get these shoes. Treat yourself. Because you know what? We've won the lottery. If charisma was a fruit, he'd be a dried up raisin. He really would be, right? Here we are back for another episode of Too Good to Be True Crime. My name is Rich and I live in the UK. I'm a good friend and podcasting colleague is Austin Turner. He's over in Manhattan, New York City. Hello, buddy. How are you?
Rich, top of the morning to ya. We're recording our pod a little bit earlier in the day than we usually do, so I've still got my morning voice.
Mate, I was thinking this is also our first podcast that we're recording on a Saturday, aren't we?
It's been a crazy few weeks for both of us, and Saturday was the day that worked, so Saturday night is all right for fighting, and Saturday morning is all right for potting.
It's the time. It's the time that we could find for both of ourselves. Normally it's about late afternoon for me and late morning for you, but it's early. You're up early doors, mate. I can hear that gravel in your voice. Yeah. So I can say, get your coffee. Get your coffee. Good morning.
Oh, yeah.
What are you doing today with yourself? Are you going out later or are you just staying at home?
Yeah, I'm going to go rock climbing with my little brother.
Rock climbing?
It was his birthday recently, and Aiden's now 22, and he is in uni, but the passion of his life is rock climbing. So he does rock climbing at a rock climbing gym, an indoor place down in New Jersey. So that's where I'll go. He's made a bunch of friends at his rock climbing place. He may have made more friends there than he has in his 4 years of uni. He just is always hanging over there. My little brother's going to Mexico in a few weeks to climb some gigantic mountain with the rock climbing friends. Yeah. So it's been an awesome thing for him, and I'm really pumped. I've climbed with him a little bit, but I haven't been to his home gym, the rock climbing gym that he spends the most time at. So I'm gonna go out there later.
Right. So the rock climbing centre that you're going to this afternoon? Is he going to be like, hey, Austin, grab that one there, and you're like, what? This one? Hey, what the fuck? And you're down.
I'm sure that's how it's going to be. Yeah.
You were telling me before we started recording you've got a sore back because you've been playing a lot of gigs. Mate, rock climbing, that's not going to do anything to kind of neutralise your back pain at the moment, is it? It's just going to add to it, if anything.
It's true, but it's my little brother. I can't bail out on him,
No, mate, you've got to do it. Well, mate, have a great time. I hope you enjoy it. Take some photos and some videos. I'd like to see them.
Yeah.
Shall we get into today's pod?
Yeah, it's been a little while since we investigated a Too Good to Be True Crime, and I'm really eager to hear what you've got for us.
Mate, I'm excited about this one. I came across this one whilst doing some research, and I was like, we have to include this story in a Too Good to Be True Crime. So let's get going. What I've done, I've entitled this one Lottery Liar or Jackpot Joker. So you can decide for yourself what you want to call it.
Ooh, choose your own title.
Choose your own title. I quite like Jackpot Joker. So, Austin, today's Too Good to Be True Crime. This all started with a pair of shoes. So Kathy Walmsley from Doncaster. So Doncaster is getting towards the north of England, up towards Yorkshire. Beautiful country up there. So Jackie Walmsley from Doncaster had fallen in love with these shoes. Now these shoes only cost £8. £8. Not expensive, but Kathy could not afford them. Her husband, Howard Walmsley, then said to her, I think you should get these shoes. Treat yourself. Have them. Because you know what? We've won the lottery. Kathy couldn't believe it. Howard had told his wife that they'd won the lottery. So this was back in September 1998. Now, Howard and Kathy lived in a small council house with their 8 children. 8 children. Imagine that. That's going to be manic.
Can you tell us what a council house is? Because I think I know, but...
So a council house is kind of like subsidised housing. So kind of the rent you would pay, you pay it to the local council. It's a subsidised rent, so it's slightly cheaper than living in like a private rental or having a mortgage. So essentially you're getting a little bit of help.
So this married couple and their 8 children, they're not very well off, at least in this chapter of their life. They're in the council housing. No. £8 pair of shoes is hard to pay for, but hey, they've won the lottery. I'm already hooked.
Exactly. That's exactly right. So she couldn't afford them. She was devastated because she fell in love with these shoes. I've seen these shoes. Maybe we'll put a picture of these on the link. They weren't nice, to be honest.
What do they look like? Can you tell us about the shoes? Paint us a picture.
I don't know much about heels, but they were a pair of black shoes. I would imagine they've got like a 2-inch heel. It was a thick heel, and they had kind of like straps from the toes all the way up to the ankles. They're
dress shoes?
I would say you would wear them on a night out. Personally, I mean, I personally wouldn't wear them on a night out, but Kathy loved them.
Yeah.
But she couldn't afford them. So Howard said to her, "We've won the lottery. You should get them." September 1998. They're living in the small council house with their 8 children. Howard, he ran a painting and decorating business, and this business was not doing particularly well. And Kathy had had enough of it, and she wanted a divorce. I think it's a bit selfish, Kathy. Why don't you go out and get a job as well? Although I'd imagine her job is looking after the 8 children.
Yes, it sounds like she has her hands full.
So I'm feeling sorry for Howard at this point, because he's obviously really desperate to save his relationship. They were like debt collectors and loads of people like knocking and calling at the house all the time, and he wanted to buy himself some time. So he told Kathy, "Don't worry, it's all going to be fine. We've won the lottery." But he told Kathy to keep this news to herself. I've watched Howard in many interviews whilst doing this research, Austin, and I have to say, if charisma was a fruit, he'd be a dried up raisin. He really would be, right? Apart from a Thunderbirds puppet, I don't think I've ever witnessed anyone in my life speaking and not moving any part of their face whatsoever. It was not even his lips. I tell a lie. His bottom lip would move. That was it. So you're kind of like, I know this guy's talking, but it looks like the picture's frozen, because he's literally like, everything is just deadpan completely. It's
like
fascinating.
A bit of a ventriloquist. He needs to get a ventriloquist dummy, yeah.
I encourage the listeners or the viewers on YouTube here to take a look at this documentary about him, which we'll put the link in at the end of the pod as well. Okay, so eventually Howard did tell his sister and his brother-in-law. Their names were Bev and Nigel. He said to them, "Listen, we've won the lottery. Don't tell anyone." But then he went and he told their neighbours, Marge and Karen, as well. So he'd begun to start telling people that he'd won the lottery. But he didn't actually divulge how much that he'd won. So, of course, you tell one person, they tell one other person. Each one of these people's going, "Hey, don't tell anyone, but Howard's won the lottery."
Little whisper down the lane.
Exactly. Eventually, across the estate where they live, it's a small community. It's one of those places where, like, everyone knows everyone. And if one person knows your business, every other fucker will know your business as well. So they all belong to like a local social club. So on estates, there's like the local social club is kind of, everyone can belong to it. I think it's like costs like £5 a year to join, get subsidised like alcohol prices. It's cheap to drink in there. It's kind of like where people go for their social time at the weekend. So in the social club, Howard was buying everyone drinks. He was taking people out for meals. So everyone just believed that he'd won the lottery. And Howard really enjoyed the attention that this brought to him. Now, what Howard had actually done was borrow some money from the bank. So he'd gone to the bank, said, "Can I actually borrow some money?" And this was back in the 90s, so I thought it was probably easier to borrow money than it would be right now. It's like trying to get blood out of a stone, trying to get the bank to give you anything these days. So what he did, he borrowed some money from the bank, and he took Kathy on an all expenses paid holiday abroad. And they went to the Canary Islands, which is, the Canary Islands they're south of Spain. They're owned by Spain. It's just off the west coast of Africa. Now, at this point, he still hadn't told Kathy how much he'd actually won. And he told her to be careful because the winnings were in an offshore account, and so far only the interest is available to them. And that's the way it would be for a while. So you're thinking at this point, aren't you? Kathy, do you believe him, Kathy? Or would you be asking a few more questions? So Kathy would ask these questions and she'd say, "How much have you won?" But Howard would just say, "I've won a little bit." So you can imagine that Kathy's probably thinking, "Oh, he's playing cheeky little games with me here. He's won a bit of money. He's not telling me how much it is. Once it's all come in, I'm sure he will tell me then." So on this holiday, they meet a couple of new friends, Brian and Gloria. And when they were drunk, they told Brian and Gloria their secret, that they won the lottery. Now, Howard paid for everything on this holiday, for himself, for Kathy, for his new friends, Brian and Gloria. And this is because Kathy kept saying, "Howard, you pay for this. No, Howard, you get that. You pay for this." So you can imagine, like, Howard's going, this is a bit stressful, but I'm having to pay for everything here. That holiday cost Howard about £2,400. This was money that at this point,
she's like, oh, my husband can pay for it. Oh, my husband can pay for it. He's got the bill.
So you're thinking, has he got this money or hasn't he got this money? So when they got back from this holiday, Kathy was getting a little bit suspicious of the lottery win because the bills are still coming through the door and the bills hadn't been paid. So what she decided to do, she kept asking Howard, tell me how much we've won. When are these things getting paid? He kept saying, it's in an offshore account. We're getting a little bit of interest. Don't worry. It's all going to be fine. I'm going to take care of it, right? She's busy looking after the 8 children. So she hasn't got a lot of time on her hands to kind of be worrying about bills and jobs, all that kind of stuff. That was Howard's department in the relationship. So what she did, she got in touch with Camelot. Now, Camelot are the people that operate the National Lottery, the governing body, if you will. And she asked Camelot, has Howard won the lottery? Now, of course, due to privacy and stuff, they wouldn't give her any details. They couldn't tell her anything. But what they could do was give her the list of amounts that had been won and the days that they were won on. So she kind of deducted like when Howard would have won this money. And so from the winning date and the list that Camelot gave her, she had actually ascertained the amount on that day that Howard had actually won. And what Howard had won was £8,904,558. That was his lottery win on the day. All right? So she's thinking, wow, this is absolutely life-changing amounts of money.
Yeah, we didn't win half $500,000. We won 8 million. Holy moly. Almost 9 million.
Yeah, almost 9 million, which, as we know, that is life-changing. It's a frightening amount of money, really, isn't it? Because, you know, I'm sure most people would like to win the lottery, but to suddenly have 8 million or close to 9 million, that would frighten me. I'd be panicked because what's the first thing you do? What do? You know, we all say, oh, I'd go and buy a house, I'd go and buy a car. But when that money's sitting there, I think I'd be so frightened. I would definitely need some good advice.
Well, anyway. I've met your fiance, and I'm pretty sure you did win the lottery, Richard.
Oh, you smooth talker. She's gonna hear that, and she's gonna beam a big smile, I'm sure. Shout out to Jem. Right. So, Kathy sat Howard down, and she said to him, "Have you won £8,904,558?" And Howard looked her in the eye, and he said, "Yes, that is what I'd won." Right. So I saw a TV interview with him, right? So later than that, in a TV interview, he said, I had to lie, otherwise Kathy would have known the truth. Well, yes, of course, Howard. That's how it works.
That is, I believe, how truth and lying works. Yeah, if I don't lie, true. Then the truth is the other option.
She's going to know the truth. And he said that with his deadpan expression with only his bottom lip moving. Right. So a few months later, they were still living in their small council house. Howard was still saying the money was in an offshore account and it would be available soon. So to throw Kathy off the scent a little bit, he decided he was going to throw a big party and he was going to share the news with everyone at this party in the social club on the estate that they live in, right? At this party, Howard, he bought drinks for everyone all night. That cost him £600. Now, in a social club, those drinks are cheap, man. So to actually spend £600 on drinks, although that is actually probably not that much in the grand scheme of things, the amount of people that were there, actually for Howard, £600 is a lot of money at this point. But what he also did that night was tell people that he was going to give them all cheques for between £50,000 and £150,000. So everyone at this party thought, I feel like we've won the lottery as well because we're going to get anywhere from 50 to 100 grand from our good friend Howard that is part of our community on the estate that we live in. But those cheques at that party never materialised. Howard's under pressure at this point because he's going to have to prove his win. Because Kathy is, even though she's, should we say, I would say she's a little bit gullible, and I feel a bit sorry for her because I think her husband, who she trusts, and she's never had a reason not to trust before, has told her this information. And she's taken him at his word. But obviously there's an element of doubt, there's an element of suspicion within Kathy.
But it's also like if your partner said that you won the lottery, in a way, I imagine there's something in Kathy, even if she suspects, she doesn't want to have to face the cold hard truth that they didn't really win the lottery. So whether it's conscious or not, perhaps Kathy's also just like going along with it, and if he says then he says, I'm not going to question it, that kind of thing. Like,
of course, they've got 8 children. They live in a small house. There's not a lot of money to go around. The kids are probably saying, "Well, Mum, where's my fucking dinner? I'm starving." And then she can't afford to feed them. And so she's thinking, you're exactly what you said. Like, she'd rather believe something that she maybe in her gut thinks might not be true than actually realise that it's not true and they still have no money. So, what Howard did, he took Kathy to a Jaguar car dealership. And he chose a car that cost £38,000. He also chose a car for Kathy and a car for another family member. And this took his bill up to £98,000. Now, word had spread around. Now, this was a local car dealership as well. So word had spread through the town that Howard had won the lottery. So a lot of the people that lived in the town and worked in the shops, they, you know what it's like eventually, if you tell a lie for so long, eventually it just becomes the truth, doesn't it? Gossip becomes reality rather than just opinion. And so in this car dealership, they believed him. They took him at his word. And the car dealers, they gave them flowers and bubbly. Of course they did. I mean, I think a car salesman would give you his underpants if it meant he could close a deal, right? Actually, that reminds me, actually. I was going to do a shout out to the Kia dealership opposite a new house that I'm going to be moving in. And they're having a bit of work done on their garage. And you know what they're doing at the moment? They're parking all their cars in the driveway opposite my house. Like, literally, so I can't get my car in. When I go and view the house, I can't get my car in. That takes the piss, doesn't it? It's like they've got this massive car park and they're parking in the street. Unfortunately, there is no residence parking signs up. So what I might do is just take my Fiesta and drive it and sort of park it right just in their showroom. You know, when they open the big doors, and can just park it in there and go, I will move my car when you move your goddamn Kias from my driveway, yeah? Shall I do that?
Yeah, I think this qualifies less as a shout out and more of a shout at. This is a shout at the Kia dealership.
Yeah, I can't bear it in like car salesmen. They're always like Flash Harrys, aren't they? They've got always got like a white shirt on and like a bright purple tie.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
I know.
You go, hey buddy, yeah, come look at this. They open the door for you. Anyway, yeah, car dealers are not my favourite people. Move your cars from my driveway, Kia.
Yeah, there's going to be an ongoing feud here, I'm sensing. I don't want to put any bad juju into the air, but we may end up with a Too Good to Be True crime of your own, Richard.
Or we may just have a true crime when I smash my Fiesta through their windows. Anyway, back to Howard. So Howard's at the car dealers, and listen, the dealership was astounded by Howard's generosity, and they just accepted him at his word. And the reason why they are astounded at his generosity is that he was telling them that he was going to buy a tractor and he was going to give it to a village in Africa. I mean, good for you, Howard. I mean, a village in Africa, they've got to walk 5 miles for clean water. Howard thinks, I'll tell you what they need. Let me buy them a tractor. Dear me. Anyway, so Kathy at this point was thinking, things have gone too far for this not to be real. She's thinking he's going above and beyond. It's got to be real. So she suggested that they move from their small house that they lived in, because there's quite a lot of crime on the estate that they lived in, right? So she said, let's move, and let's move out into the countryside. And Howard said, yep, fine, no problem. So they found this big country home, and it belonged to John and Carolyn Norris. So Howard, he closed the deal and he agreed to pay John and Carolyn Norris £285,000 in cash. So he said, I'll buy your house, I'll buy your country home off you, and I'm going to buy it cash, and I will write a cheque for £285,000 cash. So John Norris, who owned the house, he said it was a dream come true for him and his wife, because they wanted to sell their house because it was the upkeep was expensive for them, their business wasn't doing very well, and to sell it for cash, it made them feel like they had won the lottery, because they could restart their lives again and actually kind of claw back some money that they may have lost from their business. So when Howard turned up to buy the house, he turned up in a borrowed limousine. He wanted to set the right impression, and he took the Norrises out for a drive. He wined and dined them, and he was telling them about the plans that him and his wife had to update the house and renovate it, which was going to cost about 300 grand. They had all these plans drawn up: courtyard, stables, gym, swimming pool, you name it, it was there. Even had a swimming pool specialist come in and draw them up plans to create a swimming pool cover that could turn into a dance floor. So it was going to come up from the bottom of the swimming pool, the water was going to drain away, and they could turn that into like a party, and they could have a dance floor. Even that was going to cost Howard from between 20 and 40 grand. Howard had plans drawn up for Kathy's dream kitchen. That was going to cost 17 grand. But 17 grand at this point, because of what he'd won in the lottery, that was only going to be like 2 weeks interest. So 17 grand was like 2 weeks interest that they were going to have accrued from that 8.9 million. He ordered a £6,000 bespoke made snooker table. And all he had to do for that was pay a £500 deposit. But the guy that ran that company said that £500 deposit was never paid. Right. So the meter was running at this point, Austin. The costs were racking up quickly, and the pressure was building on Howard. Imagine that pressure. So he's agreeing to pay for all these things. Kathy's excited, but him and Kathy were arguing a lot. Howard was really snappy. I'm not surprised.
Do we know if the Jaguars, had they been paid? Were they paid in cash, or was he just...
At that point, he'd agreed to pay for them, but no money had exchanged hands yet. And the Jaguar dealership, they were just taking him at his word, because I think there was... It doesn't say in my research, but I think there was a time frame from ordering to actually putting down any kind of deposit. Now, my experience of going into a car dealership is that you have to leave some sort of deposit. Whether he did that or not, it might have been a low deposit, or whether, because they knew he was a lottery winner, word has spread around and gospel and gossip had become reality now. They just took him at his word. It was the 90s, so it may have been easier at that point. I don't think it would happen now. Kathy was asking questions. What are we going to buy next? What are we going to do with it? But Howard would get so irritated, he'd be snappy, and they'd start arguing, which confused Kathy, because as she said, we had all this money. Like, why are we arguing? Howard would get irritated, and he'd go out. Now, he didn't just go out and just go for a walk or go to the local pub. He couldn't go to the local pub. He said what would happen is he would sit in the local pub, and everyone in that pub, even if it was 5 people in there or if there was 20 people in there, would all know that he'd won the lottery. So he ended up spending more money going and sitting in the pub than he would have done if he was on his own. So the pressure was really building on him. What he would start doing was going to the local newsagents and spending between £60 and £70 a week on lottery tickets, hoping that he would actually win the lottery and his lies would become truth. I mean, he's clearly not the brightest light on the Christmas tree, but I would say, I don't know what you think, he's definitely got some skills in manipulation, right?
Yeah, I feel like if he was working for a bigger company, if he had some kind of, C-suite job title or something like that, he could be running a huge Ponzi scheme here. He's flying solo. He's done it all on his own.
Exactly. I mean, let's go back to the car dealership. If he worked for them, he'd be selling 5, 10, 20 cars a day for those guys, wouldn't he? He'd be a good employee.
He's got to start using his powers for good instead of evil. He needs to come to the to the light side.
The side of light. I mean, to be honest, mate, I think the first thing I'd have done if I was Howard and I'd won the lottery, I would have got myself a haircut, because I've looked at some of the photos of him and he's got the most horrendous mullet. I mean, I think Bon Jovi from 1985 has been asking around for that haircut back, mate. It's awful. We'll put a link in. You can have a look at Howard. So the bills kept coming. Kathy's suspicions kept growing, and she said she wanted this proven once and for all. So this is where it gets really dark. I mean, this is very manipulative. It's incredible what he did, but it's very manipulative. What Howard actually did now, he wrote a cheque for £8.9 million and he paid it into his bank. Austin, did you ever live in a world where there were cheques? I mean, you're a bit younger than me. Do you remember cheques?
I do remember cheques. I have never owned my own checkbook, but we print
You're
out we print off checks or send in digital checks for rent. But I always, for some reason, I always think of a check when I think of my parents taking me to music lessons, because they would always write a check, piano lessons or voice lessons. They would always have a check. It would always already be in the envelope, and it was my job to make sure I hand the check to the voice teacher. So
I think eventually it will go completely. I remember having a checkbook. I don't remember ever balancing a checkbook because, to be honest, in my 20s when I was an actor, I had no money anyway, so there was nothing to balance, mate. All I could do was write a big fat zero and go, yes, that's what I've got. I digress, Austin, my friend. So what Howard did was write this check for £8.9 million, and he paid it into his bank, knowing, as when you write a check, that it goes on the account as money, but it would bounce in a few days. So when you have that check paid in, on your account, that money shows up. So what he did, paid in the check, then he printed out a statement showing the 8.9 million in his account, knowing in 3 days it would bounce and it'd be taken off. But for that statement, it showed that he had 8.9 million pounds in his bank. And I tell you what, mate, Howard repeated this trick for months, bouncing checks for millions to himself to show the car dealership and any other demand for payment he was required to show when he asked. All he did was bounce a check, go to the ATM, print off a statement and go, there's your proof. And because the banks, again, the bank's local community, everyone knew each other, because the banks thought he was a millionaire, they kept allowing these checks to bounce, okay? So, mate, this even worked with the country house he was buying. He wrote a check for the £285,000 for the Norrises. Mate, what he even did then, he even helped the Norrises move out of their country home into a caravan, knowing that the check would eventually bounce. And the Norrises, mate, they moved everything out of their house into this small caravan, even their children and everything they owned. Howard was there, he was laughing, he was joking with them as they moved out into this small caravan. Okay, so we fast forward a little bit. Howard and Kathy were due to move into this big country house. And the day of moving, at 6 a.m. in the morning, there was a knock at the door. Everything was packed up at this time. Now, Kathy was a very generous person. So what she had done, all the possessions that they owned in their small council house, like their sofa, the washing machine, pots and pans, she would spend so much time cleaning them all up, and she was just giving them to all her friends and family. So she was giving away all their possessions, thinking we're going to have all new possessions in this big new country home, leaving her with not much at all, okay? At the door at 6 a.m. when there was a knock, it was the police. But they knew nothing of Howard's lottery lie. They were investigating fraud claims on Howard's previous business, and they'd spent 2 years following up Howard's previous debts. So he'd run up debts, he'd obviously gone into some sort of administration, had problems with his business. Kathy didn't know about this either, and the police had been investigating, and that's what they were knocking at the door at 6 a.m. for. And Kathy said, we can't do this today, we're moving. And the police were like, nah, I don't think you are. So Howard, again in an interview later, claimed that he was happy that the police had caught up with him, because obviously he was living under so much pressure, and he was relieved because he could finally tell the truth about his lottery lie. But instead of that, he said to the police when they knocked at the door, what's the problem? Everyone's going to get paid. I'm a lottery winner. So he maintained his lottery lie at this point. And the police, at face value, they actually believed him. And I saw a couple of interviews with the police officers, and they don't like people like Howard. They don't like people that are fleecing the system. And the policeman that investigated said his initial thought was, you lucky bastard, you lucky bastard, because they thought they got him, but because he won the lottery, or they thought his debts are going to get paid and he's basically going to get away with it and he's not going to face up to any kind of criminal charges. Anyway, they took Howard in for interview. Howard maintained his lottery lie all day, all morning, all afternoon, until well into the evening, until eventually the police said to him, Howard, you have to tell us, have you won the lottery? Left or right, up or down, has Howard won the lottery? Howard finally admitted he hadn't won anything. Not a thing, not a stitch. It was all a lie. So the police then said to Kathy, Howard has something to tell you. And of course, then Howard told Kathy they had won absolutely nothing. He'd been telling a lie the whole time. And as you can imagine that. Imagine if your wife had led you down this kind of ruse of we won the lottery, everything's going to be fine. Yes, you've had your suspicions, but as you said before, Ost, you kind of want to buy into the fact that this could be true. I mean, how you got to be feeling sick in the stomach at this point, correct?
Oh yeah. Yeah, your life could. She's like, oh my gosh, our lives are going to change. All of this hardship that we have, we can get out, move on, move up, climb the ladder, and now.
Yeah. So you can imagine Kathy was absolutely devastated. So she threw Howard out, and she told everyone it was all lies, it was all fibs. She was so embarrassed, because a lot of people were saying to her, because what's the first question if that gets revealed that is all a lie and it's not the truth? What's the first question you think someone would say to you, Ost?
Well, I would probably expect that people thought I knew the whole time. I was in on the joke.
Yes.
Or the scam.
The lie, exactly, because people would say to her, how could you not know? And she said, because he was so convincing, and every time she asked him for some sort of proof, he worked a way to actually give her some kind of, and it wasn't absolutely definitive, but it was enough for her to continue to believe him. And she wanted to believe him. She loved the guy, she wanted to go, this is my husband, I trust him, it's all going to be okay. Again, like we said, she was looking after 8 children, they were taking up a lot of her time. And she said it was really sad because local people stopped speaking to her in the street. She lost her community. No one was pleasant to her. She lost all of that. She lost all respect in the local community. Gets even worse, my friend. So, on top of all that, poor Kathy, through the police investigation, it transpired that Howard had also had a mistress. He had a mistress for all the time. So not only was he married to Kathy, he had a mistress on the side as well. Now, Howard had managed to convince this mistress to take out a loan for £30,000, which he told her they would start a new life with this money. They'd move away. They'd start a new life. He'd obviously manipulated this mistress as well. But instead of using that 30 grand to start a new life with his mistress, he'd use that 30 grand to convince everyone in his real life that he was a lottery winner. So that's what he was using the 30 grand to take people out for meals and buy them gifts and give them money. Okay. Now, I have to say at this point, at that point when Kathy finds it out, what do you think? We could probably ascertain what she actually thought. She probably thought, what an arsehole, right? Literally, what a wanker. I hate this man. So what do you think she did?
If she was just as conniving as her husband, she would also try and take money out in his name, and then once she has the cash, just hold on to it. But I don't know. I hope she doesn't give him another chance. She's got to figure out now, what is she going to do for work? She's basically a single mother now of freaking 8 kids. So either she's trying to get back at him, or she's just, keeping her head down and trying to figure out what's going to be the next step for her. I really feel very bad for her.
At this point, I'd be an advocate for Kathy trying to fleece Howard out of a bit of money. But unfortunately, Austin, that was not the case. And your worst fears are going to come true here, Austin, because what Kathy actually did was take him back. He convinced her that he did all of it because he loved her so much and he didn't want to lose her. And poor Kathy, her dignity, her pride, her respect, it must be on the floor. She must have thought to herself, I deserve nothing more than this. So she took him back and she gave him another chance, right? Now, the Norrises, who they were buying the country house from, they lost nearly £30,000 in this deal because they'd been paying out for things. They'd been paying people things. They eventually managed to sell their house, but a massive loss, and they had to use the money, to pay off debts that they'd accrued to other people. So the architect that was going to create the swimming pool dance floor for them, he informed the swimming pool company that Howard wasn't actually a lottery winner. In fact, what they actually said, the architect phoned up the swimming pool company and said, just so you know, he ain't no lottery winner, he's a wanker, end quote. That's what they actually said. A quote from Kathy was that it was a nice dream while it lasted. And I go, well, Kathy, it wasn't really anything. You can't really say it was a nice dream while it lasted because it never existed. And there's a documentary which we'll put a link to as well at the end of this. There's the kind of shots of them then visiting the places that they were going to buy and like looking over the garden fence going, oh yeah, this is Howard and Kathy together after she's taken it back, and she's like going, oh yeah, we were gonna, well that was gonna be moved into, that'd have been nice because that was gonna be the swimming pool area, that was gonna be the guest house over there. I'm like, it wasn't ever going to be that, Kathy. Like it never existed.
It was a nice lie while you believed it.
It was that is brilliant. It was a nice lie while you believed it. It was never a dream. It was a fucking nightmare, to be honest, if you ask me. So Howard faced 13 counts of deception in court, and he was told he would definitely face a prison sentence. He also went to see a psychiatrist who concluded that he would most likely reoffend, which Howard disagreed with. Well, of course he's going to disagree with that. I think there's...
I swear to God I won't.
Yeah, I mean, I think clearly there's some kind of mental issue with Howard that he kept this lie up and went to such extravagant lengths. I mean, I guess one lie leads to another, and it just gets bigger and bigger.
And it wasn't the first lie. As you said, the cops came to their house because of a previous, web of lies that he had spun.
That's a very good point. And before it was money deception as well in his previous lie. The night before he went to court, do you know what Howard did?
What's that?
He bought a lottery ticket and he sat down to watch the draw. So in the UK we have like weekend draws and there's a midweek draw, so I'm presuming this was a midweek draw. So he bought a lottery ticket and he sat down with Kathy and hoped that he would win the lottery. And you know what? He didn't win.
Oh, of course, I thought you were going to say he won. Oh, that would have been amazing.
Imagine. He did get sentenced and he did go to prison. Now, I want you to tell me what you think his prison sentence was.
I don't think he should be in prison for less than 2 years. Probably at the most 5 years. And I would be absolutely gobsmacked if he got 10. I don't think he's going to get 10 for this. I think somewhere between 2 and 5.
Mate, that is absolutely spot on. Howard got 3 years and he pleaded guilty for fraud. So 3 years, mate. Well done. That's great. That's because we're in the system now. We've been doing this for so long.
We're just know. True crime professionals. That's right.
Yeah. So he had a nickname in prison, and I love this. His nickname in prison was Bonus Ball. Over in the UK, I believe if you get 6 numbers, that's the jackpot. But if you get 5 numbers, and if the bonus ball, which is another number that gets drawn, you get 5 numbers in the bonus ball, you might get a couple of $100,000 or something out of that. So his nickname in prison was Bonus Ball. Kathy, again, whilst he was in prison, she stood by him and she said, and I quote, "I can only be pushed so far. He knows if he does this again, I won't stick around." I mean, Kathy. Poor Kathy. I mean, bless her.
She's lying to herself too.
I know, mate. I feel sorry for Kathy. Yeah. So she stood by him. And really, to be honest, that's the end of the story. But I did do a bit of a follow-up. We'll call this the "Where Are They Now" section. So this was back in 1998. So a lot of years, 20 odd years has passed, 25 years has passed since then. So where are they now? So Howard and Kathy, they did eventually break up. I don't know what the reason for that was. I don't know whether it just ran its course.
It could have been anything.
Had enough.
Gosh, maybe it was political differences. I don't know.
Yeah. I've no idea on the whereabouts of Kathy at this point. The research didn't deduct where she went. But Howard, well, this is what happened to Howard. Howard went on to con 3 grandmothers out of £400,000 and went on the run again for fraud 18 years after his lottery lie, and is believed now to be living in Vietnam. So he's wanted fugitive still, living in Vietnam, Will he ever face justice? I don't know. And Howard, I hope you do. And that, Austin, my friend, was the story of the lottery lie or the jackpot joker.
Damn, Howard, get your shit together. But I've been compiling research for a future pod episode about a certain type of work, and I think Howard might be interested in this type of work, and this type of work is training birds to go find money.
Training birds to go and get money?
Yeah. Let's let this be a little bit of a teaser, but also a suggestion to Howard. Get a real job, Howard, like training pigeons to pick up dollar bills off the street and bring them back to you. You know, some kind of honest work. Gosh, Howard.
Mate, he's so manipulative and he's so clever. I could genuinely believe that he could probably convince us that he could train birds to pick up dollar bills from the floor, to be honest. I mean, imagine if we could get Howard, if you're listening, mate, shout out to you if you want to be a guest on the pod. Because I'd imagine if we had Howard as a guest on the pod, I reckon he could convince us that what he did was for the greater good.
Yeah.
He has those skills. But honestly, Ost, when you see him in interview and you see him talking, you're like, how does this guy manage to convince a whole community and his wife and initially the police that he was a lottery winner and everything is going to be fine? It's a skill and a half.
It's like the Bernie Madoff scam, or maybe like Catch Me If You Can, you know, Leonardo DiCaprio, except it feels like very blue collar. the trailer park version, yeah.
It's the trailer park version of Catch Me If You Can. Yes, mate. Oh, well, there you go. But, dude, I hope you enjoyed that. I really enjoyed doing the research for that. And I was looking at, videos and documentaries and reading about it. It was making me feel a bit sick because I was thinking to myself, if I'd been duped into thinking I'd won that money and suddenly all your kind of financial problems and that goes away, and suddenly, they say money doesn't buy you happiness, but what it does, it buys you freedom. So you can do things and not worry about certain aspects of your life. That kind of elation at thinking everything's going to be solved financially, but then the sickness that comes when you realize that isn't the truth, mate. Oh, it's awful.
Richard, we're performers. I don't know what you're talking about, financial woes. Man, we're podcasters. We don't have those.
Literally, we're on 5, 6, 7 figures for this podcast. I mean, that's just. I was talking about my previous life.
I got
Austin.
you.
You understand that?
Yeah, pre-pod. Yeah, got you.
Yeah, mate, pre-pod. But there you go. So that was the story of Howard and Kathy Wormsley. And I would just say at this point, guys, if you want to subscribe and like, please do that. It's been a pleasure, as always, seeing your beautiful face over there in Manhattan. We'll see and listen and talk to the viewers and the listeners on the very next podcast. Buddy, it's been a pleasure. Love you.
Adios, Rich. Love you too, buddy. Speak to you soon.
Too fucking good to be true crime.